Hello everyone. Good morning. Thanks for signing up so early. Where do you dining from? What time is at your time zone? Because it's 9:30 a.m. In Vancouver right now. Good morning. Hello. Thank you so much for coming so early. Oh, it's 6:30 in Italy. Thanks for dining from Italy. That's pretty cool. 7:30. Oh, it's 12:30. Wow. Hi, Vancouver. Hi, Danny. Oh, hi. You're from Mark from SF. I guess we're at same time zone. Toronto. Good morning. Oh, we have Pramish from London. Hello. Thank you so much for dining from all over the world. I'm so excited. Wow. Yeah, so this live is about interview prep. I invited some interviewer from Amazon and Meta. So we are going to talk about what is interview content and then what is the interview structure, and they will share their suggestions, guidance about how you can better prepare interview. So before I inviting them to the stage, I'm gonna do a very quick recap for our previous events, because previously we've done resume clinic, like people from from big tech share their resume, get into tech, and also we have an offer negotiation. People share their experience and suggestions about how do you negotiate offer. So if you see this. Okay, right corner, they have thriveup.co. I uploaded all my events to this page. I can quickly show you before we start. So if you type the website, oh, okay, you will see this. I just updated this page, and then you will see the previous events and upcoming events. So the resume one is the previous event. Interview prep is our current one, and I have some upcoming events listed here. You can also scan the QR code on the this part. This is to if you're interested in the upcoming event. We are going to have one more about career path in 2 weeks, and we're going to talk about designing your life principle from Stanford, and then people share their guidance about how do you design your tech career. Yeah, so that's pretty much about the event recap and upcoming events. Oh, also, if you're dining from LinkedIn, you're able to see my previous recording on my LinkedIn post. If you're dining from YouTube, you're able to see the previous event recording on YouTube stream tab. Yeah, just for your information. All right, and let's go to today's event. Interview prep is FANNG engineer, and I'm gonna introduce our speaker. Hey. Okay. Yeah, thanks. Let me know if you have any feedback. Yeah, hope to see you more hope to see you in the future event. Beatrice. Beatrice. Yeah. I hope I pronounced your name correct. All right, I'm gonna invite our guest speaker today. And first, I want to introduce Inti. So Inti, she is a senior engineer at she's a software engineer, a senior engineer at Amazon, and she's also a very experienced interviewer. She's been in Amazon for 6 years, and she has a lot of experience before Amazon. I'm gonna invite her to the stage to give a brief introduction of herself. Hi, Inti.
Hi, Annie. Good morning. And hi,
Morning.
for all the audience. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Yeah, so my name is Ingti Liao. I'm currently working in Amazon. This year is already my seventh year in Amazon. I joined in as a SDE2, and in 2022, I got promoted to Senior Development Engineer. I've also done a lot of interview in Amazon, as well as coaching the mentee outside. So today I'm gonna share my experience based on the mentoring experience I had internally and externally, and also share some of my insight that might be helpful as an interviewer in Amazon. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, that's very exciting. Thanks for introducing yourself. Do you want to share a fun fact about you to for us to get to know you better?
Fun fact. Oh, so maybe I always think about I'm a dog person, but I have a cat right now.
Oh, so you're a cat and dog person.
Yeah, I mean, I always thought I would have a dog, but actually I got a cat, and I love cat right now.
Interesting. Thanks for sharing that fact about you. And next, I'm gonna inviting Navi. Navi is a hardware engineer from Meta. She's also doing has a lot of experience with VR, AR. I'm gonna invite her to the stage to give a introduction of herself. Hi, Navi.
Hello, everyone. A very happy Sunday morning here in New York, at least. Well, afternoon. Hi, I'm Nivedita Gaur. I work at Meta as a silicon architect. I have a lot of experience like Hindi, mentoring people, and interview. So I'm here to share my experience with you all, and probably this session will help you in your interview prep, in how to prepare interviews, and cope up with the whole process. So nice to meet you all.
Cool. Cool. Thanks for giving the introduction of yourself. And I'm gonna share the slide to get started. So how we gonna run the session? Okay, before we start sharing the content, let me ping this. Um, yes. So we have a agenda over here. At the first part of the our talk is about technical part. It's mainly focusing on lead code, or also we're going to share a little bit about hardware engineer technical part. And around middle part of our life, like 10:20 to 10:40ish, we're going to share about behavioral question part. So if you are not an engineer, if you're a designer or just curious to learn about interview in general, I think it will be valuable to stay. It will be helpful to stay around that time. And at the very end, we're gonna talk about system design. So if you're looking for interview like senior software engineer role, if you're curious to hear more insight about system design interview preparation, I strongly suggest you to stay to the very end, which is around 10:40 to 11-ish. So yeah, I'm just gonna pin this agenda on the screen so that you know which part. If you're interested in any specific part, make sure you don't miss that part. Um, Also, I have a speaker's QR code there. If you want to connect with speaker on LinkedIn, you can scan the QR code and you're able to ask questions after live and yeah, learn more about their experience. All right, I'm gonna pin this to the stage. Okay, yeah. So um, let's get started. Let's start from understanding the engineer interview process. Inti, do you wanna give us a brief introduction of what is the process look like?
Yeah, sure. So let's get started. So when it comes to tech interview, as a software development engineer, usually we follow those process to conduct an interview for you. As a candidate, when you start an interview, usually recruiter will reach out to you. Usually the first round will be a simple phone screen. Basically, it can conducted by recruiter. Sometimes will be hiring manager, but basically just know more about you and assess if you are the right candidate to go to the next step. in this initial assessment. Usually it wouldn't take too long, like 30 to 45 minutes, to talk about your resume, talk about why you want to interview our company, and also some basic technical skill. For example, for the new grads candidate, we often ask, oh, do you understand what's the array? Do you understand what's the linked list? And as long as you can briefly talk about what are those data structure and how to use it, usually you will pass the phone screen. Phone screen sometimes is just like they call you, or it doesn't require video call. But I do know for some phone screen they require video call, and you gotta do a simple coding on that. So still, when you receive the phone screen, get prepared. Mostly just need to ensure you understand everything around your resume and get ready to talk about the project and solve some technical problem. And then luckily, if you are passed, you will go to the main technical interview. So the main technical interview, usually it will be 3 to 4 rounds, with every round about 1 hour. In this technical interview that will talk about the coding, including data structure and algorithm, and also system design. It will also include the behavior interview. Sometimes behavior interview will be combined together with the tech interview. For example, they may take 15 to 20 minutes, talk about your project and access based on the behavior question. Or sometimes it can be a standalone behavior interview. Just use the entire session, assess your soft skill, problem solving approach, and for whatever project you have worked on. And lastly, about the QA session, I think this is also very important in the interview process. In the Q&A session, you will be able to ask interviewer or hiring manager whatever things you are interested in their culture, or if you're interviewing a specific team, what are the team culture, what are the service they are working on, or what are the vision. So do also prepare for the Q&A session, because that's the part you will show you're passionate or show your interest to the team. Yeah, so that's basically the interview process. I want to highlight about the technical interview parts. So although we are saying it will take like 15 minutes or even 1 hour, but actually when you start to solving the problem, say you're solving a coding problem or you're solving the system design problem, usually cut off self-introduction and the final Q&A session, we will only have about 35 to 45 minutes to solve the problem. And that makes interview a little bit tricky. Even you are a good programmer or even you're a senior candidate, you need to get practice and get prepared enough to solve the problem, or solve the problem or bring up the comprehensive system design in the 35 to 45 minutes time window. And that's why and how we would like to evaluate more in the next few sections.
Yeah, I'm so curious. What are some, like, as an interviewer, because you're obviously interview so many people in Amazon, and as an interviewer, what are some common mistake you see during the coding interview?
Right. So for coding interview, I often see candidate once I post the problem on the whiteboard, and they just like don't ask any question. They immediately jump into the solution. But
Okay.
what we would like to see more is about the thought process, right? What is there any question or edge case they want to clarify before start coding? Or is there any approach in their mind about how to solve the problem? As a candidate, definitely you don't want to waste your time to coding 10 minutes just for a greedy solution. Sometimes you can talk to interviewer about, oh, I want to solve this solution in some way. Are you aligned with my idea? It's better to get the alignment on your problem solving approach with interviewer and start coding. That will make sure first, interviewer understand your approach and could follow out your thought. And second, save your time on greedy solution and can go to the main coding part.
So, for example, by the way, anyone who are watching right now, feel free to throw your question. This is a valuable time for you to ask interviewer directly any question you have with interview preparation. I'll pay attention to the chat and select your question. But yeah, meanwhile, while we're waiting for any questions in the chat, I also have a question. I wonder for the technical interview part as a software engineer, what is a bar? Is that something you cannot release? Like, what is a bar that, how do you know someone's passed the bar? How do you know someone doesn't meet the
So,
bar for the interview?
right, that's a good question. So particularly for coding part, we would expect all candidate at least come up with the greedy solution, right? So sometimes the time complexity can be n squared. At least you should be able to talk about it. Say, oh, maybe I would use two for loop, iterate with all possible cases, and then and then try to get the answer. That's at least everyone should be able to talk about it. But we don't expect candidates spend time to coding that because that's too easy. And what we're expecting is based on the understanding of greedy solution, how do you come up with a better solution? Either it improve time complexity or it improve the space complexity. So with that complexity constraints, it can be solved in multiple ways. We expect all candidates can at least come up with the improved solution and solve it.
You
When it comes,
see, we have, oh,
mm,
sorry.
yeah,
Oh, yeah, I was just saw there are many questions from the live, but I don't mean to interrupt you. You can continue.
yeah. So just the last part. So talk about optimal solution, right? Like some problem can be solved in the linear time complexity, but usually we expect candidate can solve it with few hints, right? We don't expect candidate can solve it all by themselves. We expect say, oh, maybe it got stuck somewhere, and you have few rounds of discussion with
Mm,
interviewer after the hint that you could think through by yourself and solve it.
okay.
That's the best case.
So if I'm a candidate, I couldn't solve it. When I got the question, I have no clue how to solve it. I can ask for help. It is okay to ask for help
Exactly.
because
Yeah.
you're demonstrating that you're communicating, and it's okay to solve it with the help with some hints, right?
Exactly. And that's why
Um,
we talk about you need to think out loud, right? Think out loud is not just about you talk for what you already understand. Think out loud is also about how you discuss with interviewer where you start, what's your current thought, and how you're going to solve it next.
yeah. Do you want to? How about we quickly go through the live question so that
Sure, I see a lot of message come up.
yeah. So the technical part before after behavioral question.
Is the technical depends. So as I say, behavioral interview can be a separate session or sometimes including in the technical interview.
Mm,
uh Usually if it's included in the interview, it will be after the self introduction, and interviewer will start asking about, oh, like, can you talk about what's your the 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 project that mostly like your best achievement in your career, or can
mm.
you talk about some conflict you ever had with your team or your manager? And after 10 or 15 minutes, then jump into the coding part.
Cool. Derek asking about pseudocode. What do you think?
Yeah, pseudocode would be great, because but it doesn't have to be pseudocode. As long as you communicate clearly and make sure interviewer understand your approach, that will be enough. But
Interesting.
I
Okay.
would recommend everyone try to practice write down your idea on the whiteboard or write down your idea on the panel, because now most of the interview will be conducted by the remote video call, right? So it's not in person. It's very
Mm,
important to make sure interviewer follow up your approach. And if you write down the pseudocode, actually as an interviewer, I'm easily to point it out. Oh, here is not clear, or maybe you could think about some part before you start coding. So having a pseudocode actually a good idea to make sure you both align.
mm. But you have to be aware of the time because, as you mentioned earlier, you have to solve it within 30 to 45 minutes, right?
Yes.
For my DF asking, is it too problematic if I ask too many clarifying questions? Like keep asking clarifying questions. Like, what do you mean by this? What do you mean by that? Uh, is that okay?
It's okay, yeah, but do aware about time management, right? As I say, time management can be tricky. Mostly interviewer will take care of that, because as an interviewer, I the only thing I want is to collect the data point and see if I want to vote for higher or decline, right? So if you spend too much time dig into the questions and haven't start coding, they maybe impact the time frame, like where you have sufficient time to code or not. I would suggest maybe no longer than 3 minutes. But if they do have a lot of questions and interviewer didn't stop you and ask
Mm,
you to proceed, then that should be fine.
mm, thanks. We have another interesting question from Divya. They ask, what's the best way to prepare for a system design interview? Do
Mhm.
you ask system design interview for intern position?
No, you can stay until 10:40. We can talk about it. We have like a
Okay.
few slides later. Yeah. System design prepare and the question is quite different from how you prepare coding, and that's why we have the separate section later. Yes, I do have
Mm,
some
sure,
insight to share. But we can go
sure.
next.
Uh, so, Onkar ask machine learning role.
Yes, we do have. Yeah, so machine learning roles, depending on what machine learning role, if you're a data scientist or applied scientist, I'm talking about the roles we have in Amazon, right? Like even in machine learning area, we have multiple role about it, or even data engineer. They're managing for data retrieval and automation, right? But as far as I know, there will be at least 1 or 2 rounds of data structure and algorithm, because as a programmer, you should be able to understand and conquer those problems as fundamental skills. And for machine learning specific, they would have separate round of interview, uh,
Mm,
asking you more specific question about machine learning domain.
mm. Let's
Yeah,
just pick.
and one more data point is
Mhm,
like even software development manager in Amazon, they are
mm,
required to be able to solve the problem during their interview, and system design as well.
I see. We have another interesting question from Abhishek,
Abhishek?
and he asked, is it fine if our idea is correct? However, we're not able to code it up.
Oh, there will be a no hire decision, because
Oh, okay, no higher.
yeah, well,
Oh,
back to the problem, right? Greedy solution, improved solution, and optimal solution. If you talk
mm,
about improved solution, you do have good idea but not able to code it, then it's actually a no hire, because we expect you can solve it. And of course, like during the process, you may be struggling, but you come up with the solution with the hint, right? That might be okay depending on how you perform. But if you just ask me based on this question, or by the end I couldn't solve it, then actually it's a no hire decision.
mm. Let's pick one more before we go to next one, and we'll for sure address those questions like after, or you can connect with our speaker
Yeah, sure.
afterwards to ask more questions. But we will have like a multiple posts later on to address live questions. Um, let's just pick. Do you ever give a yes to someone who doesn't come to a viable answer if their logic and thought process is solid?
Ever give a yes to someone who doesn't come to no, never.
Never. Okay.
But as an interviewer, say we will do the on-site interview, like same as other company, right? You will have 3 or 4 rounds. That means one candidate will interview 3 or 4 different interviewer. The standard interview process is after the on-site interview, all interviewer would discuss about the feedback and performance altogether. So usually, say if I vote for no hire in my session, I still need to discuss with other interviewer to see if they have strong higher intention. And of course, sometimes I would change my vote, because if we do see a lot of bar raising data point, a lot of like common good skills, then we might change the decision for sure. But
Mm,
the thing is, other interviewer need to convince me why the candidate you hire a candidate who cannot solve the problem, but we still want to hire them.
Mm,
Thinking if you're an interviewer, things you have to consider is, do I want to pay from my own pocket to pay this candidate, and he or she will sit right beside me working on the same
mm,
project with me? If he or she cannot solve the problem, would I still want to hire them and to be part of my teammate? Right? That's a
mm.
very critical question every interviewer need to ask themselves before making
Yeah.
a decision.
So essentially, this interview is meet your future teammate, and you're trying to evaluate how do you like to work together.
Right. Right. Do we want to take the risk to hire a candidate who cannot solve problem? Right. That becomes
Mm,
the question.
I see. We have a lot of questions about legal, and then I think it's aligned with our next slide. How about we go to next one, and then we go back to the question.
Sounds good.
So next part is technical skill preparation. I think we highlight legal algorithm part here. Inti, do you want to take over?
Yeah, sure. So the technical skill preparation basically consists of four parts: data structure, say trees, graph. We require candidate to understand the fundamental, not just about how they can be built, but also which one to be used to solve the specific problem, right? Like say, when do you want to use array? When do you want to use a dictionary? And
Mm,
how those data structure can solve the problem in the efficient way. And next is algorithm, right? Say sorting, or searching, or like BFS, DFS. Those algorithms are commonly used for coding. For coding interview, similar as data structure, we require you have good understanding and know when to use it, right? And often it associated with the complexity analysis. Sometimes people say, "Oh, I want to use quick sort," and I will say, "Okay, then what is the time complexity?" They don't know, and I will like, "Then you don't understand quick sort." And some people they don't care about that, but that's kind of a red flag. Although you can code, but you don't understand the idea behind, that's kind of questionable. Uh,
okay. So you cannot just memorize the answer or memorize how to do quick sort. You need to understand how it solve the problem and understand what is the time complexity and what is the data structure that's involved so that you're able to explain it
exactly.
clearly. I
Exactly.
see.
Thinking about during the interview, when you see the problem and you have discussed with the interviewer on clarifying question, the next thing is actually talk about what's the greedy solution, right? And after you discuss about the greedy solution, you have to come up with the better one. So usually in here, you should be able to talk about, oh, if I use quick sort, I will solve time complexity by something something, and
Mm,
the final time complexity can be improved. You should be able to talk about that during or before you start coding. Often, when you come to the technical interview, uh, after you implement the approach, you should be able to go over the code. Say, okay, from this for loop, we start to do sorting, or from this for loop, I will going to manipulate element in this dictionary in some way. It's better you bring up a test case, right? Say, okay, based on your
okay,
problem,
test.
the test case,
Mm-hmm.
and you walk through the code with interviewer, explain how this work. So that again require a lot of good understanding from data structure and algorithm. And this is where we want to test candidate if they really understand what they're doing.
I have a question. For your test case, do you have to write down like what is the output for each step, or you just very briefly walk through the test case? So for example, if the input is the empty graph, then the output is the edge case, like handling something like that. Or you have to like go line by line and then explain what is the expected output for each line.
So depending on what candidate prefer, some candidate have very good communication skill. They could explain everything very clear. Some candidate is like more carefully checking every step that they will usually go through line by line. But the optimal goal is make sure interviewer understand what you're thinking. I do see some candidate, they are struggling to elaborate their idea, even though their code is correct. So I need to guide them and say, okay, can you stop here and show me in this step what's the variable value, or what's the next step it will execute. So that's also where we want to evaluate the communication skill, right? Again, think about if he or she is your coworker sitting beside you, you are working on the same project, and they couldn't explain how their code work. Is this a red flag? I think sometimes yes, right? So how to describe the approach based on the implementation is also very important. But how you want to demonstrate it, it doesn't matter. You have to write it down or you need to just talk about it. The goal is to make sure interviewer understand your approach. Yeah. So
Sounds
just
good.
pick up whatever you feel comfortable and practice on that. I think that's the key.
Sure. Let's go to some live question, and while waiting for more live question,
Sure.
I think previously Audrey asked, can just provide a solution by pseudocode, right?
No, yeah, we have to provide the actual code really can be executed. One example is usually we don't care what language candidate choose. They can choose Java, they can choose Python, or some people choose C++. But the thing is, for whatever language you choose, you need to know how to write it, right? Like say the statement. Say if I have the dictionary in Java, and if I want to check if a key exists, right? So sometimes you will say object dot contains key, or like something. Some people couldn't come up with that, and that's concerning, right? Like if you say you are a Java developer and you don't know how to retrieve a value from the object, how can I make sure you are a good engineer? Like if for someone who interviewing the SDE role. So we expect candidate can write a full code and also walk through the code with their thought process.
I see. We have another question from Shivita. I hope I pronounced your name correct. And they ask, how many test cases on average are sufficient for a technical interview?
I would say 1 or 2 would be sufficient. You can give one for
Okay.
happy case, right, and one for edge case. That would be good.
And Samidaha asked questions about how do we get better at leak code? If you're not able to come up with a solution by yourself, even trying for 30 minutes, what should we do?
How do we? So in this case, we really need to spend time to practice leak code. But definitely based on the failure, we need to learn from the failures, right? Like either maybe you are not familiar with certain type of data structure. For example, I'm very good at string and array, but somehow I just don't understand the graph related problem, right? Or some
I think
dynamic programming.
we are going to also mention about technical preparation in our following slide.
Yeah.
So, yeah. We have another questions about new section on legal about statistics and machine learning question without any relevance to data structure. So does big tech company adding statistics based on programming separate interview round? Do we have? I'm not sure about Amazon interview
Currently,
process.
no. As far as I know, it's not. And also, I think this is a good question. Actually, before you go to interview, right? Say either you apply the job by some internal referral, or either you apply the job with a recruiter. Actually, you can ask the question, like say, okay, what kind of interview it is to your recruiter? And usually they will try their best to get information from hiring manager or the other technical recruiter to give you some insight, right? Say, for my example, I joined Amazon 6 years ago, and during that time I was in Asia, so I totally don't know how North American company works when it comes to interview. So
how do you prepare?
I asked my recruiter what will be the interview look like. So she told me, oh, it will be 4 rounds, 2 system design, 2 coding, and for coding you should look into legal for those
Okay.
algorithm and data structure. So I think same as your case, if you're applying for certain role or just general role, it doesn't harm. You should actively working with the recruiter to get
Yeah.
more information about interview.
Yeah. Recruiter is a great resource to reach out for help and get more information about the role you're interview. Kevin asked, what do you do when you have no idea how to approach the question? So you're given the question, you're absolutely no idea what the question, how to approach it.
Yeah, so if you
How do
are
you
already
suggest them to do?
interview, yeah, ask. But instead of saying, oh, I have no idea, try to explain what you have in mind, right? Say you don't know how to do. It's definitely because you have some idea, but it doesn't work. And why those idea doesn't work? A
Mm,
lot of time, candidate keep this in their head, and result in me as an interviewer, I seeing a freeze candidate on my screen. So actually, if I
freeze.
want to
Oh,
give hint, I also
mm,
need to know where you get stuck, right? So I would suggest in this case, you should actually start talk about it. Say, okay, I want to start with defining a dictionary, and this dictionary can, like maintain the data in this way. But
mm,
based on the problem statement, apparently it couldn't solve some of the problem. So when you start talking about that, one is you iron out your thoughts, right? Like you
yeah.
iron out your thoughts again. Second is, as an interviewer, maybe I have chance to stop you, say, hey, dictionary doesn't work, or say, no, you have to think from other way. So here is how the discussion can start it. So don't hesitate to bring up your idea, even it doesn't work. It's also a way to give the hint to interviewer. Okay, maybe interviewer need to give you some hint. Mm.
Yeah. So if you see a candidate just freezing with like they stuck, but they not reach out to help, they're not communicate about it, then that's a sign that you you probably know it's probably a sign of no hire. Is that correct?
Usually, when I see them start to feel struggling, it's
Mm-hmm.
not a red flag. I wouldn't write down
That's
say no
okay.
immediately. I would say, oh,
So
what?
that's okay if you're stuck.
That's okay. That's
Yeah.
okay. Mm,
Okay.
that's
Mm.
totally fine. I would usually ask, what are you thinking? And
Mm.
also in here, I want to highlight that a lot of people, or even me, I would just say I recommend people think out loud, right? But how do
Mm.
you execute it, depending on your personality. Some people get very stressful when they get
Mm.
interrupt, right? They need some time to really think about it. So I
Yeah.
recommend, and I also see a lot of candidates doing so. They say, "Oh, can you give me 30 seconds? Let me first think about it, and I will let you know my thoughts." So
Mm.
give interviewer some idea, like should I wait? Should I interrupt? Or what should I expect, right? If you are a person who like to talk, then just talk about it. Don't hesitate to talk about, even you are stuck on something. But if you're a person you need some time to think through, just give interviewer a heads up. Say, hey, can I think about it for 30 seconds, and then we can talk about it. In most of cases, they will say yes. Why not, right? We have 35 minutes to go, just 30 minutes for 30 seconds for a thought process. They will definitely be fine.
Uh, very, yeah, I have a very interesting question about AI. That do you think the future people don't, uh, you may only need people understand system design and use AI to code. I guess that's,
Uh, yeah, I would say like in future or even near future, AI can help us do a lot of things. But as a software developer, as a human that really work in the team, you need to understand. You need to identify if this is a good quality code or not, right? Or
mm,
sometimes when you are working in the big company, there's a lot of coupling, there's a lot of microservices, so you need to know more fundamental, and you still need to know the service-based question. AI can solve the problem, at least for now, just like, okay, if you need to write a quick sort, they can write faster than you. But how
Yeah.
does this apply to the question? It needs your own judgment, right? And the
Mm,
understanding also shows how you understand. It's not just about understanding the problem, but the decision making and thought process that reflect your knowledge about the tech domain.
mm, that's a great answer. Someone, uh, okay, let's try this one. This question, Lex Man asked this question. He asked, what are important topics for entry level position?
Topic means like
Maybe what do they, yeah, do you want to clarify it, Lex Man? And I saw the important topic can be what do you recommend people to prepare or emphasize or like this focus on in their preparation for entry level position.
wow. So if it's for data structure and algorithm, they basically cover everything, right?
Everything, no
Mm,
focus.
no, you need to know. But I would say like if you go to lead code, right, and then you can sort the problem based on the frequency, right? Like say how often it's being asked in interview. Usually you can take a look on the frequency, and you can kind of know like what are the most popular area you should prepare and make sure.
Mm, sure. We have a lot more questions. Let's go back to them after our because we're going to talk about planning. How do you plan your interview to
Mhm.
better prepare for? How do you plan your preparation so that you can doing well at the interview? So before we go that, we can go to next slide
Sure.
about hardware part. I'm not sure, Nevi, are you still here? Let me remove myself so that I can. Okay, hi, Nevi.
Hello, hello.
Let's
Uh,
talk about the hardware part in case some audience are interested in or they want to looking for a role in software engineer, hardware engineer.
I think Yingdi has already covered most of the part that is required for interview, which is very common to hardware as well as software. But there is a difference comes when in technical interviews for hardware, right? So hardware is a very vast field. Like you can have architects, you can have designers, you can have verification, validation, all the way to like until you get the silicon chip, right? So there's no fixed set of rules in hardware that can define what you're expecting. It's always on job description to job description. But I've tried to cover like basics of what every hardware engineer should know. So
Mm,
like digital design, right? The basic fundamental difference between a software and a hardware interview is our coding languages, the way you perceive digital design. So you should every hardware engineer should know about digital logic design, gates, transistors, or a basic understanding of them, like how what's combinational and sequential logic, microprocessor, microcontrollers. Then the like I said, like I am a silicon architect, but I have been in this industry for a decade now. Before Meta, I was a rocket scientist at ISRO, where I was building the digital designs of satellites, right? So there you need to have knowledge of physical design. Guys, give me 1 second. So right. So where was I? Yes. So if you're, let's say, an architect, then you also need to have understanding of C, C++, OOPS design, basic understanding of programming languages, Python, which is very common to software engineers as well. Then comes the system design and architecture part. You need to be thorough with the internal architecture of how you like microarchitecture, architecture, memory controllers, and then comes like once you have your design ready, you need to have understanding of languages utilized needed for that, like system verilog, so that you can participate in testing, debugging, verification, validation. So this is how I would um, summarize hardware design, and these are the
mhm.
basic technical skills needed, because I have been working from architecture all the way to when you get your silicon, back in my previous job and in my current job as well. So but cover few parts, I think few generic parts, which apply the questions that have been asked and which apply to hardware design as well are, let's say if you don't know the question, you're in a
Sorry.
interview. Go ahead, Ani.
Oh, no, sorry to interrupt, because we're going to have more content later on. Do you mind do
Yeah,
it quickly conclusion, and we can go to the planning together?
sure. Yeah, just like be thorough with logic design, and if you are not familiar with a question, talk talk to the interviewer as much
Yeah,
as you can,
communication.
ask questions, because it's always good to talk rather than give a wrong answer because of some
Mm,
assumptions that you made in your head. So that's how I would summarize.
thank you. Um, So so now we go through the interview technical part, like interview process for hardware and software. Let's go to the planning part. How do you plan your interview preparation so that you're able to doing well at the actual interview? And I'm gonna invite Inti again to kick kick out the slide. Into do mind opening your camera? Thank you.
Yes, I was just get a little bit into answering the comments.
Oh,
Yeah,
thank you for helping.
everyone have a very good question, and I'm happy to answer that. Okay, now coming back to planning the milestone, right? I do have some idea here to share with all the audience here today. We often say, okay, you gotta have the plan before you start planning on that. So here is what I'm thinking. First, definitely you need to set a clear goals. What I'm saying here is you gotta be specific about what you want to achieve. It's not just about, oh, I want to get a job. Like, what kind of job do you want to get and in what timeline, right? So instead of thinking about, I want to get a job, think about, oh, I want to get an entry level developer job in big tech company in next 6 months. So start thinking in more specific way to set a clear goal that will actually help you to think through the planning part, right? And say next is the timeline. Say as I just made, for example, if I want to get an entry level job in next 6 months, I actually suggest you think backward, right? Say, okay, 6 months later, I'm gonna be a software developer. Then what should I do in the next 3 months? What should I achieve in next 2 months? What should I achieve in next week? Right. So planning backwards actually help you to define the milestone based on your goal.
Have a
Alternatively,
have a question.
yes.
When you say you wanna like work backwards, a lot of people they just wanna get interview or pass interview as soon as possible. How would you recommend? How would you suggest them to best prepare in that scenario?
As soon as possible. So, okay, I will see this problem as two parts. The first is
Mhm.
if you want to get it as soon as possible, just try to apply whatever position is open and get the internal referral. Because now the tech industry is still not recovering well. I think if you have internal referral resources from your friends or whoever you know, that will be the best way to get you enrolled to the interview, and utilize all of your time, practice system design and lead code. Make sure you have good fundamental understanding. As I mentioned before, if you couldn't solve the problem with the improved solution, it's clearly a no hire, at least in that session. So you need to make sure your performance is secure, and you need to plan on that. So that's my answer for whoever just want to get a job, landing on the job, whatever the job is, as soon as possible. But I
Mm,
also want to bring up the second point, which is my perspective. Sometimes we need to reset the expectation, right? Say, when I joined Amazon, before I joined Amazon, I was in Japan. I work in Tokyo, and around 2017, a recruiter suddenly contacted me from LinkedIn, and I didn't have any content on my LinkedIn. They say, "Hey, do you want to interview Amazon? We are from North America." I said, "Yeah, why not?" And then I interviewed Amazon. I got an offer. That's the happy case, but that's kind of like common when when it was in 2017, 2018. After COVID, we all know layoff. We all know there's huge amount of good candidate out there who just couldn't get a job because they don't have opening. How do we think in this problem? You need to reset the expectation. It's not just about I am a good engineer. It's also about there's just not much opening out there. So
Mm,
how do you build your resilience, not just about the technical skill, but also the planning. And that's why today we bring up the planning part to make sure, okay, even in a short time, I want to get my job, but maybe in the next 1 month, there's just no job opening. I'm just
mm,
not getting invited into the interview. What should I do next? Right. So I think here we provide another thought process for you. Well, how do you reset your expectation? How do you adjust your goal? Actually, in step 1 and 2, you can always go back, right? Say, depending on the reality, you just not get enrolled to the job. Then maybe you need to reset your goal. You need to reset your timeline, and that's how you come to the third point, right? Like you need to
mm.
have the checkpoint. Say, okay,
Yeah.
if I aiming for 3 months, 6 months, but
Mm,
I didn't get it, maybe I will reset my goal. Maybe I will say, okay, I will spend more time just to slowly build up my technical skill, and maybe I'm aiming for next 1 year when everything recover in a better status. So in that case, maybe you will start think about, maybe I have more time to join the networking event. Maybe I have more time to study AWS certificate. Maybe I have time to do some side project with the generative AI, right? So you, by resetting your goal, you know your flexibility, you know your capacity, and that's how you can move on with the long term achievement.
yeah.
Let's.
I I completely agree. And I remember when I was trying to interview for Amazon and Google, I also have a very clear goal at that time. Uh, I know the specific company I'm looking for. I do the research, and I have a plan. Like it was, I study like 1 month. What is the focus? And I know the like how good I am at the like the data structure, so I cannot know what I need to improve on, and then have a corresponding plan. And then when like what is when to practice something new and when to review, and then so I think have a good planning definitely helps a lot. We have some questions in the live Q&A. Let's go through them. So what do you think the reasonable timeline for new grad? Because you think the job market is not that good. Inti, what do you think?
So first, I'm not sure if you are in Canada or not, but I do know, say for Canada, if you are graduate, um, despite you have a job or not, and say if you are graduate after I think 1 or 2 year, they no longer consider you as a new grad. So I feel the good time
Past the 1 year new grad.
you as a new grad try to get a job.
Yeah.
Not sure if it's applied for people in Europe or US, but new grad definitely that's a benefit because people evaluate you in the lower standard, right? They expect you have general understanding, but doesn't expect you can solve complicated problem. Um, Getting a job in new grad. So I would say in 1 year, yeah, depending on your goal and your status. Like say in Canada, most of the people they are student, they hold a student visa. So once the visa expire, they no longer can stay in Canada. So maybe depending on the visa problem and also your own timeline. Mm.
Thanks. I think Audrey also asked,
How do
how
you
deep do we talk about project given we don't have the code with us? Because you're not demo your project. I think that's an interview behavior question.
Right, right. So overall, interview process already consists of coding and behavior question. So when you talk about your project, you don't need to worry about the coding because you should have already shown your technical skill in the coding part. When
Mm,
you talk about your project, focus on the impact and your action. right? Like say, oh, I have done a really good project. I'm super proud of it. This is my biggest achievement in my career. So you should talk about the impact, the complexity. If you're making any decision or trade-off that leads to the result, this is something we would expect you bring up when you talk about a project. Mm.
Thank you. I think my Yank asked, is competitive coding needed for fan?
Remind me, what is competitive coding?
I think the the competition for
Oh, no, it's not. So that's a good question. So if I understand correctly, it's something about, I think many years ago, something about ACM, like say you gotta solve the problem in the like very few line of code.
yeah.
Essentially no. If you recall in the technical problem, other than data structure and algorithm, we have something called object-oriented design. I didn't mention in the earlier slide, but I can mention it here. Uh, we are also looking for, we look for candidates who are not just can solve the problem with data structure and algorithm, but they also need to implement maintainable and extendable code. And I think sometimes this concept is a little bit against with comparative coding. Comparative coding is like given a problem statement, how do you
Mm,
solve it in the most efficient way, in the
mm,
most clever way, or like something look very fancy. But in the industry or in the real world, what we care more is actually how do you maintain it, right? Like say how you
mm.
catch the exception, how you make sure it's extendable. So that's why we need object-oriented design. The short answer for you here is no. But I'm talking about the general software development role that we actually care other indicators. I hope that
I
answers.
also, oh, sorry. Sorry to interrupt you. You go ahead.
No, that's all my answer. Yeah.
Oh, I also want to add my experience with it. I was actually do the fun practice with ACM at UBC when I was in university, and a lot of people I know who do competitive coding, they actually because they're practice a lot. So a lot of friends I know who do competitive coding, they actually get a job in FAN
Mm.
or some really good big tech, but it's not required because as Edie said, Inti said, it require you to also know like object-oriented design, system design, and you need to know behavior. So you need to be good at demonstrate your technical skill and the behavioral and your project. So it's different. They have some overlap. It helps, but it's not required. That's my experience and my friend's experience. Um, and we have some more questions. Let's go over them. Mohan said, besides DSA and system design, are there other type of technical interviews like low-level design interview?
Low-level design interview. Usually they will cover in system design interview. Say if you are able to solve the problem very quick, like you have bring up the comprehensive design. Sometimes if we have extra time, we will go into the lower level. Say talk about, for example, scalability or reliability, and that's the timing you could elaborate your knowledge during interview.
I see. Thanks. I think there's a question for me about for graduate students in STEM. Are there good opportunity for students who are graduating in fall 2025 big tech? Would you recommend to graduate in spring 2025? Uh, I say it's hard for me to predict the future, but I can see from the current data and current job market is slightly getting better, at least later this year than early this year. So from the data we have, it seems the job market seems getting better. But I don't know. Like, I don't know when it's a good time for you. Maybe you can share us more information about your situation so that Inti and I and Nevi, we can all give you some um, suggestions. And we have so remote job opportunity, someone based here. I actually don't know, but I know they offer less remote opportunity now because people like the company would recommend people go back to office. I'm not sure is that is Amazon the same thing?
Yeah, we are now required to go back to office, but particularly for the remote
Oh, it's
job,
not required, but recommended. Yeah, sorry.
Amazon is required.
Oh,
So
okay.
usually based on your team, say if your manager is located in Seattle, then all the teammates, ideally, they should relocate to Seattle. Mm. Actually, Anka, this one I have answered you in the chat. Maybe there's too many comments. So my answer here is I do think the LLM would evolve very quickly in the near future. But this is a little bit out of topic as our presentation today. If you want to get more involved, I would suggest start to participate in more events, and also maybe get some hands-on experience, like say by doing the side project, try out some generative AI, try out some libraries people use for AI project that could gain more practical experience.
Yeah, I put the QR code of our speaker today. So if you're on YouTube or on LinkedIn Live, you don't know who's speaking right now, you can scan the QR code and then connect with the speaker to ask questions directly if your question is not addressed during our live. Yeah, do we have anything to add for planning part? Inti and Navi? And if not, I'll go to the behavioral part. And Inti mentioned it's important to have star method for behavioral. Do you want to
Yes.
share more? Yeah.
Yeah. So whoever doesn't know STAR method, this is kind of the approach you could use in your storytelling when it comes to the behavioral question interview. The STAR actually stand for different component in a story, right? Say the story will start with a situation where you describe, oh, what's the background, like maybe, oh, I'm in the team, I'm a team lead, my team have 10 people and we are working on the new project that we have to create it from scratch, something like the background to let interviewer knows what was the situation, what's the status, and what will be the potential challenge you are facing. And then the T part is about the task, right? Often we were working on the project with other teammates, but we got our own assignment. What's the assignment on us? Say, okay, I'm creating the search engine, but I'm managing for the backend part, or I'm managing for writing the algorithm on that. Explain specifically about the task and responsibility that fit in the situation you described earlier, right? And often,
Inti,
yeah.
would you like to give us an example of how would you describe something with star method in a
With
behavioral interview?
Oh, I can go through something very quickly. So say often they will ask you what is your biggest achievement in your career. So this is actually a very good question for a candidate because you can try your best to brag about yourself. So usually you will pick up one project. So for me, if I want to talk about a project, I would say something like, "Oh, when it comes to layoff, my team got reorg, and as a senior software development engineer, I got assigned to the new team where I never worked on the tech domain before. But in that year, we need to deliver the project before Diwali because Diwali is a festival, very important festival in India that directly contribute to Amazon retail space. So that's the situation part. The task for me, I as a senior developer, I need to handle design and implementation, collaborating with the stakeholder team. We have more than 2 teams we collaborate on this project, help them to realign on the tech goal, design detail and implementation. I have 5 more engineers working with me in the same team, so I also need to leverage the task to them and make sure we deliver on time, right? So say this is the task part that I try to bring more information and say as an interviewer, maybe they are not working in the retail space. Maybe they are working on machine learning. But with my situation and task, it gives them enough context to understand, oh, what's the project about? What's the challenge about? And then comes to the action. How do I solve this? As although I'm the senior engineer, but I have no idea on the tech domain. Say, okay, I can elaborate it or I can itemize it. First, I engage with each of the principal engineer and senior designer to make sure the design is reviewed and aligned with the long-term approach. Uh, Talk about challenges. The most challenging part could be I need to make the trade-off because we need to deliver by Q3, but the platform team, they have some migration project, they have some long-term goal we need to align. So in this action part, I can actually talk about, okay, how I evaluating those trade-off. What's the factor I was looking into? What's the communication or extra effort I put it into this design? And by those action, either design, implementation, communication, it will lead to a result. So in here, in behavioral question, often you will bring a positive result. You cannot say, okay, I actually fail. That's not a good example you would bring up to the interview, right? So usually the result could be, okay, the project got delivered. Everyone is happy. But how it got delivered, right? You can say, okay, it's because I made the trade-off to define and find a simplified solution to simplify the process, then it leads to the result that we could deliver on time. Or because I dive deep into the system design details, I make sure we have enough reusable component and minimize the tech debt on blah, 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 that it leads to the result that even we deliver as a short-term solution, we don't sacrifice our long-term goal. So this is how you can use as a framework for different behavior question. For
I
example,
see.
today you're being asked a question. Can you
Oh,
tell me if you have
in
conflict? Oh, please.
Inti, do before you give us an example of conflict, my touchpad is out of battery. I need to grab my charger. Would you mind just take over explaining this while I'm grabbing my charger? Thank you.
Sure, sure.
Sure. Yeah, you go ahead. Thank you.
Okay.
You just, yeah.
Yeah. So I just so that was how STAR method would fit in when I talk about the project. It would also fit in when you talk about some conflicting situation, right? So sometimes you were being asked for the question like, have you ever like fight with your teammates or your manager? So if you think about STAR method, first you have to talk about situation. Where are those conflict come from? Maybe you are an engineer and your manager care more about the business value, but you want to raise the bar for coding. You insist on something, and that's the conflict and situation come from. The task, again, you can talk about what was assignment in different role of people. Again, bring more detail about the situation to interviewer understand the problem statement. Action, you can talk about how you address the conflict. What action did you take? Is there any special is there any special action you took to make sure everyone got aligned? And finally, result. Go back to the project itself, right? Like say, okay, after all this conflict, you actually earn the trust, or people earn the trust from each other, and eventually the project got delivered successfully. That you make the customer impact. This is how STAR method could fit in. I highly recommend everyone practice the STAR method. Again, during the interview, even you are super experienced, even you really like did a lot of great things, but if you couldn't finish a storytelling in 35 minutes, 35 to 45 minutes in the interview, that as an interviewer, I couldn't collect enough data point to decide whether I want to hire or not hire. So
Mm,
having this framework actually help you to prepare more specific and concise story that you can bring up to the interview.
yeah, I completely, I really resonate with what you're saying because I remember when I was preparing for interview, I have a Google Doc writing down all my project and my work experience. I write down everything in star method. I have a form, like I write down situation, task, and action item and result. Um, and also I write down very detailed way. And also while I was preparing for Amazon, I also emphasize what leadership principle it reflect. And I'm making sure I'm well prepared to be able to answer all the follow-up questions. And I find that's really helpful when you write down your story.
Yeah.
That's just my personal experience. So I really resonate with this star format. I think it's really, really helpful for behavioral interview preparation.
Right. I just quickly see a comment from the chat. Like people ask, what are your weakness? What do you expect? Actually, in general, when it comes to behavior question, instead of thinking, what would be the question, try to think what's the skill they want to evaluate behind those questions. That's actually would make you come to the important part. Instead of Google say, oh, commonly asked behavior question, try to look into the company culture and value. For example, I'm from Amazon. We have something called leadership principle, including customer obsession, ownership, deliver result, learn and be curious, and many other principles. As an interviewer, we design the question based on one or two principles. For example, when I ask, what's your biggest achievement? I want to see the ownership and deliver result principle. For example, when it comes to what are your weakness, as an interviewer, I may design this question based on how you earn trust, how you have backbone and disagree to commit. So actually try to think what's the skill they want to evaluate behind the question that help you to formulate your story, right? So instead of thinking what's my weakness, think about, is there any example from my work experience I can bring up on earning trust and also disagree and commit, right? And just formulate your story in the STAR method and then answer the question. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah. And also, I think I also got asked questions very frequently that if you failed a project, should you bring this up in the interview? What do you think? I usually tell them be honest, be authentic, and then tell the story about if you failed the project, still tell the interviewer what the lessons learned, how you apply them to your future project, and demonstrate your growth mindset and
Yes.
how you learn from the story. But I'm curious to hear your perspective on this.
Right. So for this kind of question, again, I believe it's more about how you earn trust, right? And how you, and maybe sometimes also related to ownership, right? So I screw up something. Instead of just leaving there to my team, maybe I think about how to improve it after that, right? So we admit failure, but we learn from that. What we care more is your action after the failure, how you make sure it won't happen again. Or if you identify this is actually something about mechanism, how do you bring it up to the team level and make sure everyone in the team would be able to handle that in future? So action is actually important to elaborate more your thoughts about not just about the failure part.
Mm, yeah, I agree. So it's not even the result is not like go even the result didn't go as planned. It's still you can mention it by share your action and your growth mindset. We have another question about in which from Shivanshu, in which context can having backbone or disagreement might work for weakness? What do you think, Inti?
How does it work for weakness? I'm not sure if I understand the question. Um, so again, right? When I think about if question regarding to weakness, then maybe because you doesn't perform well, it can be shown in different contexts. Say if you are just graduate, your weakness could be you're not understanding the service very well. under this context, you should actually show more strengths about learn and be curious, right? Like show your potential, how you can learn very fast. If you are a senior engineer and when you talk about weakness, that maybe you need more time to do trade-off to making the decision, making the right decision for the team. And that could be related to how you insist the higher standard or how you demonstrate having the backbone or disagreement, and that leads to earning trust as well. This could be interview both. Yes, this could be both good and bad. So that's why you need to design your story, right? What would be the best example from your project or from your best experience that could showcase your strengths in learn and be curious, have backbone, without exposing any risk in the interview, without exposing any red flag in interview. Yeah, that's why we need to put attention to design the story.
I see. Thanks for answering that question. Um, we have another question from Ankur that how to deal with questions we cannot relate to. For example, my classmate was asked how to convince a stakeholder for more resources for the project, but he's a student without any such experience.
Oh,
What
that's
do
good.
you think?
You can just tell
Mhm.
interviewers say I don't have relevant experience. Usually we will have few more backup question. It's okay you don't have relevant experience, but as I say, it's not about question. It's about the skill we want to evaluate behind those questions. So say if
Mhm.
I want to test your communication skill, or maybe it's about customer obsession, I have some backup question I can ask in different way. So I will
Mm.
anyway try my best to measure and collect the data point during interview as an interviewer.
Yeah, it doesn't matter it's okay to say you don't have related experience. It matters about how you answer the question and what
Yes, yes.
it
You can say,
demonstrates.
I don't have relevant experience because my role and my job or my team is in some situation, or like it just defined in this way. So in my team, this is not the case we were dealing with. Mm. Just give more information and say, I don't have relevant experience. That's okay.
Um, so for my I've said understand mentioning your weakness should also discuss what I've done to improve on it to earn trust.
Exactly. And that's why for STAR method, the A, which is action, is the most important part. You need to really talk about how you address that. And different people would approach the problem in different way. Again, if
Mm,
you see in the current slide, that's showcasing your unique experience. So that's actually a good opportunity. You elaborate more about the action.
thanks. Um, let's just waiting for more behavioral question. And then we can go to the next part while waiting for more live question.
Yeah, sure. Oh yeah. So here again, it's related to behavioral question, right? Or we often say, oh, you should bring out more data point. You should enrich your storytelling. As a software development engineer, what can we do? So I recommend you think about numbers, right? So we are all developer, or most of us are developer here today. Numbers are something easily to collect from. You can say, oh, if you've done the project, what would be the performance improvement indicator? Maybe it's about the execution time, maybe it's about the saving on CPU and memories, or maybe it's about the latency of the API you introduce. So try to find some numbers about performance improvement. Next is about the scale, right? When you describe the project to interviewer, usually interviewer doesn't know about the project. They may from different domain, they may working on different kind of services. So it's also important to talk about your scale, right? Say, okay, I was working on a web server, web service. We have the application. Talk about the scale, right? What is the size, the volume of user? What's the volume of traffic you are dealing with? That would also impact how important of your feature, right? Like you implement something that benefit how many of customer, that would be enrich the action and the result part of your story. Yeah, so scale and traffic volume. Even you can talk about the access pattern, right? Say, okay, my service, there's a lot of read requests, there's less write requests. So how do we scale it differently? Is there any different scaling strategy you apply to that? It's definitely good you bring it up in those for those detail in the story. Yeah, and finally, user base growth. It's good to see as an engineer who care about the end user, right, and also about the business growth. So if you can also highlight that, I would say for engineer, usually we got assigned to the task, but collecting those data points, sometimes you need to go back to the business requirement document that maybe managed by your manager or maybe managed by your product manager. Don't hesitate to reach out to them because you could be able to access those internal resources. And in general, even despite the interview preparation, I think it's always good to, like say, you are working in a company, you are working in a team. It's always nice to understand the impact of your product. Mm. So collecting all this information and adding it into the story could definitely make it look stronger.
How do you recommend people gather data points while they're doing a project or at work or at school?
Sure. So, as I say, it may be defined in the business requirement document, but particularly the information we can look for, first is the KPI. Right. So, when we initiate the project, what do we want to do? What is the key performance indicator we want to achieve in this project? Next could be success criteria, right? So, if you already have the service, you want to implement a new feature on that. How do you define this feature is success? Sometimes the product team will say, oh, we want to attract 10% more of customer, or we want to eliminate at least 5% of failure rate. So those are success metrics you can collect and compare with the project result. This information can be collected during the project as well. Often we have sprint planning, or maybe we have retrospective. You could collect those information and make sure it's updated when you're working on the project.
So when you're as an interviewer, when you interview candidates in Amazon, can you share example of how data points have strengthened a candidate's answer?
Okay, so back to the storytelling, right? We often
Mm.
see people describe the project, say, "Oh, I'm working on the optimizing search engine. This project improved the performance and the system become more efficient." So this is good. Of course, you've done a great project, but it's very general, right? It doesn't show any of your character. It doesn't reveal your strengths. So instead of saying, okay, I work on the search engine, you can talk about the size, right? How many user DAU is using the search engine? What is the traffic volume? Or even you can talk about the size of the server, right? I say you spin up like 20 or even more instance running every day. This is the real time application. So those information could give interviewers some idea about the service. And when you say, oh, I improved the performance, made it more efficient, talk about the specific part, right? Like even in search, they have different steps, right? Maybe data retrieval, maybe sorting, maybe there are some recommendation filtering applied. Which part you improve, and improve with how many percentage, right? And again, comes to the KPI, comes to the success metrics. How do you define this is a successful project? That's something you can think about and fit in.
I see. Yeah. Thanks for the suggestion. Um, as So now we go over the technical part and behavioral part. I think a lot of people are very interested in system design
Yeah.
and as engineer role. Should we go to the system design part to talk about how we navigate system design interview and what are some resources and what are some suggestions you would have for candidates?
Right. Yeah, so when we talk about system design, it's different from the coding, right? So I talk about coding. We look for fundamental understanding of the skill of the knowledge, and people need to walk through the code. For system design, what we evaluated basically from all these different areas. One is your understanding on the scalability. Is the design you propose can solve the problem? Is in a good scale. The next is reliability. For example, database choices, caching. How do you make sure the data is protected and secure? How do you handle the edge case? For example, when the server is down, how do you know that? How do you recover the data? That may also reflect how you handle certain data flow based on the problem statement. And next is the performance, right? Say, how do you improve the performance for traffic distribution? Maybe come up with the load balancer solution. Maybe talk a little bit more about the caching. Um, or even the database indexing technique. This is what we will talk about in performance. And last is the security, right? So how does the system perform secure? Sometimes they will ask you to design, say, credit card system, or say authentication system about user login, logout. So talk about the security in every component. That's also what we're looking for. For example, like in the typical system design interview, as a candidate, you need to think about few parts. First, they will give you a problem. Say, oh, design Amazon, design the Amazon retail website. You need to come up with non-functional requirement, or if does it care about availability, the what is the traffic pattern, and you need to estimate the size. Or so, for example, I have 10,000 QPS for read, and how many for the write, something like that.
How do
Once
you know if that's correct? Like when you come up with those QPS, how do you know it?
So
It
in
just
in
hard.
here, usually interviewer will give you some number to start with, right? Say, okay, say I have some DAU, I have a number of DAU, and you can think about, okay, with this DAU, you can ask question too. You can say, can I assume customer only visit my service once a day, or like maybe they perform search like 10 times a day, and with that you can kind of come up with some numbers and then put it into your design. And once you do the traffic estimation, to satisfy all these area, you definitely need to do the entity design, right? So how does the data look like in my service? For example, if I want to design the authentication service, I may need a table for user. I may need a table for like if you want to store tokens, and how does each entity relate to each other? And often we talk about API design as well. Now people use RESTful standard. You can talk about how many GET API with their interfaces, and what would be the post API look like with the payload. And then once all these things ready, non-functional requirement, entity design, API design, then you can start elaborating the system design. Say, okay, here I want to create one server, one service, and how this service work with the API and data flow. That's how a common system design interview would perform.
So what are some common challenges people face in system design interview?
Right. So one is time management. Again, you only have 35 minutes to complete all the design. How to manage your time is very important. Especially you need to come up all the component and describe to interviewer how does it satisfy with the problem statement. So this has to be, you definitely need to practice. Even though you are senior candidate, I recommend you still practice too. For senior candidate, often we see they have so many knowledge. For example, when they talk about entity design, sometimes they couldn't stop themselves, but just talk about the knowledge about database. But ended up, although they have good database design, they couldn't finish end to end. So same as coding, if you cannot finish end to end, that's a no hire. As an interviewer, sometimes I will try to interrupt them, say, okay, this looks good. Can we go next? But as a candidate, if you have good idea of time management, I think that will make the entire interview process more efficient for sure. And the next thing is the diagram management. So we know, like say, you will go to a whiteboard and you can put text or you can draw some diagram on that. A lot of candidates doesn't have good diagram management. Similar to coding, right? You need to walk through your design, explain, oh, how does user sign in? Or like say, if you design a ticket booking system, how does people book the ticket? How does the system send out the confirmation? If you don't have good diagram management, often for interviewer, it's really hard for me to understand your design, right? And how does each component mapping to different API or different instance? A good diagram management would also allow you going deep more into a certain design, or easier for you to extend your design, right? Say, oh, I have the service here, but say if I want to put a load balancer, I just need to point it out. Say, okay, between user and the service in the middle, I may put the API gateway, I may put a load balancer, and fulfill it based on the question you discuss with interviewer. So overall, two things: time management and diagram management. I think that's the most common challenges for candidate in system design area.
I see. Thanks for sharing that. We got some questions from live chat. Should we go through them?
Sure, sure.
I think I have a question from Shivanshu. Said, how commonly do you see this system design interview for new grad role, by the way? Because Shivanshu, he graduated 4 months with 1.5 years of internship experience, mostly with cloud technology. So how commonly do you see system design?
Yeah, so now I would say like 3 years ago, we don't do system design with new grad, but now I do understand at least one system design will include in the on-site interview. So say if you have
For
4,
new grad.
yeah, even new grad, they will sometimes ask a question. You can evaluate yourself simply thinking like, when you come to system design, and if you need to prepare for that, instead of jumping into those common problems, say, how do you design a Google Map? How do you design Uber? Simply ask yourself, I put the URL in my browser, and what happened after I hit enter? Do you know the entire process? How does the request being sent to the server, and how does the browser handle the response? How does it parse the DOM object or whatever things, and then finally show up on the screen? Think about it, everyone. Like, if you cannot think it through, that means you are not there yet. If you can understand it, then go to the other main topic. Another thing for new graduate, actually system design, again, like although I say you need to understand the basic, but you don't need to feel scared about that, because for new grad or entry level role, we are more looking for candidates who can understand the basic of system design. As we mentioned in this slide, do you have basic understanding on scalability? For example, do you know what's the definition of microservices? We want the entry level candidate has the common knowledge about these, instead of they really have practical experience to tune the service, like to tune the CPU. This is not what we are looking for from entry level. So if you're planning for the study plan, try to cover the basic area, the service, the database, the API, the load balancer. That will be sufficient for you.
So for new grad, to prepare system design interview, you need to, you will anticipate a question like, oh, what is the microservices? What does that mean? What is the load balancer? Like to ask, you will anticipate a question like that, or just direct, like a more direct question like, oh, design this website.
So of course the problem will start with design something, right? And then as a candidate, you will put some diagram or elaborate whatever design you want. But for example, if you say, oh, I want to use an API gateway here in front of a user, and it will dispatch the API traffic to my server. As an interviewer, I would expect you know what is API gateway. Or if you say, oh, I want to use DynamoDB, what is DynamoDB? So at least you need to have the surface level
Mm,
understanding on the component you introduce. Don't take it for granted. But of course,
mm,
say when it comes to API gateway or load balancer, for new grads, we usually don't ask you, oh, how do you define the path matching, or like how do you define the rule for load balancer to really dispatch the traffic? Because we wouldn't expect you to have too much practical experience on that. It's more about the knowledge and understanding.
I see. Thanks for sharing that. It will be really helpful for people who are looking for a new grad role right now.
Yeah.
And we have someone like Namika ask questions about how to say or what to explain if still not having much experience using STAR method. I guess this is not about system design and more like a behavioral question.
Right. So that's the importance of you need to prepare, right? Maybe in your current role, you didn't get enough data point from whatever project you're working on. So it's definitely okay you choose the previous project, maybe when you were in school, when you were in intern. It's about the depths and complexity you bring up in your project. It's not really much about like if that happening in your current role.
So we have Frank asking question about system design question. Do they have a very specific question or very general question?
Two things. First, depending on if you're a senior engineer or not. For new grad, usually we ask more general question. And secondly,
what is an example of general question?
like
okay, no, it's okay.
Yeah, I have
okay,
to.
you can skip that part.
Design a Dropbox, something like that. Design a Dropbox. But
Dropbox. Okay.
we cannot say, okay, I
That's
design a Dropbox. I will build out an S3 and then enable API on top of that. Maybe that's too simple. You gotta talk about more detail about the database. So first is depending on the level you interview. Second is depending on if it's for specific teams, right? Like depending on the role you're interviewing. If you are interviewing a machine learning domain, maybe you need to know more about the machine learning infrastructure and the relative automation. If you're interviewing the AWS team, of course, you need to prepare more about the services, the team they are managing. If you're interviewing with Amazon retail, then it based on the different area. I would suggest, again, this is something you can ask from the recruiter, like say, oh, do I need to prepare specific area based on the team's service? Like it's no harm to ask it. They can say, oh, I cannot tell you, but sometimes if they will tell you a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I remember when I was a new grad, I was asked a system design question for a company I interviewed for. And later on, I know that all the new grad and experienced engineer got asked the same question. They just expect you to answer. They just have different expectation for your answer. For new grad, they expect you to have a basic understanding, just outline something. Just if you know all the API gateway, you know the basic thing, that's good enough. For experienced engineer, you have to give a more like comprehensive answer. So they just have a different expectation, but the question is the same. But that's just the company I interviewed for like 4 years ago as a new grad. So I'm sure like different company have different requirement or practice. But yeah, just give you a reference for my experience. Hope it's helpful. Um, mm,
What can I do avoid? Oh, right. Yeah. So I would recommend write a short work summary after you finish every project. Because as you mentioned, easily to forget. And even you are the project owner, after one quarter, after a few months, you may forget some detail. Like you may forget, oh, how do I really come to that design decision? What was the stakeholder involved? So I actually recommend everyone even not for interview, right? Like say for your promotion purposes, it's good to have the short, just one page, right? Like what's the project, what's the success metrics, KPI, the data point we mentioned earlier, what's the achievement you have done in this project, what's the things you can highlight, what's the customer impact. Just summarize it in a page, document it for yourself.
Thank you for your suggestion. Onka said you're looking forward for similar webinar on resume with ML roles. Yeah, I can definitely have more webinar related to resume. Just just let me know what kind of resume related events that would be interesting or helpful for you, and so that I can have future events on that. Just send me a LinkedIn message or a comment on this live or comment on my YouTube live. Just send me email on my website. So just all the way that communicate with me so I know what it's helpful for you, and then I'll have more event like that. Thank you so much for your feedback. And I think you also asked questions about any way to communicate with you both. Okay, you have a QR code of our speaker today. You can scan the QR code to stay connected. Thank you. Shall we go to the next part?
Yeah, sure.
Do you want to take a break? So the mock interview part.
Yeah.
I can maybe I can talk a little bit about my experience so that you can take a like coffee break or water break while yeah, I know you're so tired answering so many questions. I appreciate that. Yeah, I think for the mock interview part, as you can see in the slide, that you can find a partner and simulate a real condition. I personally find like mock interview is very important, especially uh, simulate the real condition. So in the real interview, you're probably nervous. So you try to have an interview when you try to mock interview when you're still in a nervous setting. Try to find someone you're not comfortable with. If you find someone like your friend, your partner, you're probably very comfortable, familiar with them. You probably are not very nervous. So try to find someone maybe you're not familiar with, or just simulate the real condition. So that's really helpful. And for the mock interview, you can also try talk to ChatGPT. I think it's also helpful. And it's not about you need to do many mock interview. It's about what you learn from mock interview. What do you get feedback from people who give you interviews so that you know how to improve on. So it's more important that you reflect on your mock interview than just have just the quantity of the mock interview. I saw Nevi just show up. Would you like to share your experience of mock interview and how you benefit from mock interview?
Hi, sure. I think Annie covered the gist of it. But for me, mock interviews would be one of the different things that I try to do is have your companies sorted. So you would have some set of companies which are safe for you, some are very ambitious, and some moderate. So as part of your mock interviews, you can try to start interviewing from the easy ones so that you feel the environment of interviews, which give you confidence, and you're also prepared for those interviews as well. So that helped a lot for me while I was prepping up for my interview. Apart from that, I think talking to your friends, share like taking experiences from them, what kind of questions they were asked. And also, I think online we have a lot of material available. Like for every job description, you do have set of questions that you can go through and try to prepare yourself for that. So that would be my 2 cents for this.
Yeah, it's really helpful. Inti, would you like to share more about mock interview part, or do you need more time for?
Yeah, I can
I can.
more point. Yeah, so I think my mindset also aligned with Annie and Nevi just share. One thing I want to add on here is combining with the planning we talked earlier, right? I think you should also consider the timing, like when to start to taking mock interview. Based on my coaching experience, I would suggest you can take one mock interview before your study plan, right? Say, oh, now I start thinking about getting a job in next 6 months, and in the next 6 months I will gotta practice lead code, system design, behavior question. So before you start everything, you can take one mock interview to evaluate your current skill level, right? Maybe you feel it should be easy, but after the mock interview you feel, oh, I actually getting so nervous in front of interviewer, I might need more preparation on the behavior and communication part. So having the mock interview in the early stage, when you start the study, that give you idea on where you should focus on. So that's one. And another timing you could consider mock interview is 1 or 2 weeks before the on-site interview, right? So around that time, you assuming like you already prepare a lot, you study a lot, and you gain more confidence for sure. So that will be the time right before the actual interview. You again evaluate if there's any improvement area you could try and you could improve in the short time frame. During this time, depending on the result and your own expectation, you may schedule a few more, right? So, okay, I want to practice very intensively, make sure I cover, for example, all kinds of system design question, or make sure I can communicate clearly when I walk through my code to interviewer. So that give you some idea, like the timing when to take mock interview.
Yeah, another thing I kind of want to add is if your interview is conducted online, you should do mock interview online with your friend, even though you have friend in person. Like it's helpful if you're familiar with the environment. So if you're using your laptop, do the mock interview with your laptop in the same room. You're going to do the real interview. If you do the interview in person or do the whiteboard, try practice interview with whiteboard. So you're comfortable with writing down the things on paper or on whiteboard. So it really helps you to, like just communicate in a real interview when you practice mock interview. That's my suggestion I would have. Inti, do you have more to add?
No, I think that basically cover everything.
Cool. I'm still see if we have any live questions while wrapping up our session today. So basically today we talking about basic interview process, and then how to prepare technical part like lead code, and then how do you plan with a good clear goal. And behavioral part is important to how using the STAR method to do the storytell. Try to write down your story so that it helps you to talk about them in detail in the real interview, and then be aware of having the data in the leverage the data points interview. Be aware of gathering data when you do the project so that you're able to storytell your project in the real interview. And then in the system design part, we go over some common, like the process of system design interview and the questions. Someone asked Bruce asked, will there be a recording? Yes, you can see the recording in my linking post or my YouTube recording. So my YouTube and LinkedIn ID are anyone tech. They're the same ID. If you search anyone tech on my LinkedIn and YouTube, you're able to see the recording of this one, and you can find the one that interesting you. So the first part is technical part, middle part is behavioral part, and the last part is system design part. So you can go to the different section of today's recording to find the corresponding part that you're interested in. And also we talk about the mock interview, making sure to simulate the real condition. That's pretty much for today's live, and waiting for more questions. Oh, also, please let me know how I can improve my live events, and any specific topic you're interested in. You can let me know by comment on my live, send me the message, comment on my YouTube, or send me email, so that it helps me to prepare for my future events. That will be really helpful. And if your question is not addressed during this live, you can scan the QR code with our speaker to ask them question directly. And yeah, I'm sure they would love to be supportive. And we have another question about interview suggestion for entry-level cybersecurity role. Yeah, maybe we can have a cybersecurity engineer share that domain next time. But Inti, feel free to add your any opinions you may have.
I also need to ask a cybersecurity engineer to know that.
Sure.
A high level idea is, if you are going to interview that, you definitely know the job description, right? So say during coding or system design, based on the topic we go over earlier, you will be able to reach out to recruiter and spending time to study the certain areas.
Frank also asked, are this current FANG interviews mostly on-site or online? As far as I know, there are a lot of online. Yeah, not sure about on-site. So it's better to practice mock interview online. Try to get familiar with the environment, so you probably do better coding. Maybe just use the same keyboard, so you feel comfortable
Right.
typing. Thank you. I'm happy that it helps.
Thank you.
I will go to the next slide. Conclusion. It's important to have a good preparation, be confident in yourself, and important to gather feedback during your preparation, so that you can reflect on what you're doing well and what you want to improve. And yeah, ask thoughtful questions. Okay, session about data science interview prep. Sure. Yeah, I think so far hear people interested in data science and machine learning and cybersecurity. I definitely keep that in mind. Let me know if you're anything that's going to be helpful for you. I will have a separate event on that. Yeah, I'll also be here for another 5 minutes to see if there are any questions with interviewers or with me about how to better prepare for your interview. Oh, Indy, thanks for answering the question.
Yeah, because before COVID, I also did a couple of on-site interview. Like, we just get a candidate in a meeting room and need to write on the whiteboard. It's very challenging. Like, even I try to write something, it's not like it's just like not natural as an engineer. We type on the keyboard, so there's pros and cons.
Yeah. I also think confidence level is very important. When you walk into the interview, interviewer can feel how confident you are. And if you're very well prepared, then how you answer the question demonstrate your confidence level. So if you have a good planning, like according to ED's suggestion today, guidelines today, you have set a clear goal, have a good preparation, and have a mock interview, and prepare the STAR method with the behavioral part, and making sure be prepared for lead code and system design or any technical part, and then you will be confident, and your confidence level will the interviewer will feel your confidence level. That helps. I personally think that helps. What do you think, Inti?
Yeah, I will echo on that. And at some point that people sometimes think about, they need to show the very good vibe, right? Like, say, hey, how are you doing today? That kind of vibe. But when we say, I think any, like, summarize it very well, it's about confidence level and where you come from. It's not just about the vibe or personality. It's about the data point you bring up to the interview. Either you solve the problem, or you bring up the very detailed story in the behavior question. These are what we're looking for. I want to highlight that as an interviewer, we are told and we are trained to be not biased for personality, for whatever vibe we cannot quantify as the data point.
That's true.
So
Unconscious bias.
it's definitely okay you are a more quiet or introvert person, but as long as you can
Yeah.
bring up good data point, you could elaborate more thoughts and meeting the bar, then that's totally fine. We don't ask
Yeah.
everyone to be very extrovert, very talkative. That's not required. So the key point is to show your best. What's your best? It can be based on your personality, based on your project. Show the uniqueness character for yourself and your own project. That's the most important part in interview.
I think that's a great point. Yeah, unconscious bias is very important. And if you're not extroverted person, you don't have to force yourself act very active in the interview. As long as you communicate very well, that should be good enough, right?
Yes, exactly.
Frank asked, can we have the slide? I don't think there's a way for me to share the slide publicly, but you can message me on LinkedIn. I can send you the slide through private message, or you can watching the recording. So once we finish live, you will see the recording on my LinkedIn feed, or you can go to my YouTube recording. I hope that helps. And yeah, I'm gonna stay for a minute to see if we have more questions. Thank you so much, Inti, and thank you so much, Navi, and appreciate you like sharing your experience, your thoughts. It's very insightful.
Yeah, thank you, Annie. And also from the audience side, we have a lot of good questions.
Yeah, I'm so happy to see the questions from audience. Hope it's helpful.
And thanks, Annie, for having us. I think this is a really important and helpful session for everyone who's preparing for interviews and starting their
Thanks for
career.
joining us. All right. I'm probably gonna end the session. Thank you everyone for tuning in and ask your question. Let me know any feedback, anything I can improve, any topic you're interested in. And again, you can connect with our speaker from the QR code there. And yeah, we're going to have another Design Your Career one in 2 weeks. So if you scan the QR code at the very top, you're able to see the event. And yeah, thank you everyone for coming. I really appreciate it. And I'm gonna end the session. Bye. Have a good weekend, everyone.
Bye bye.